There is a recurring phenomenon in the history of faith that remains one of the most baffling paradoxes of human leadership. You see an individual who seems to possess an almost supernatural weight to their words. When they speak, the atmosphere changes. When they act, results follow that cannot be explained by charisma or intellectual talent alone. We often call this anointing or a divine mandate. Yet, history is littered with the shipwrecks of these exact same individuals. They start with a genuine touch of the eternal, but somewhere along the journey, the weight of their influence begins to crush the very source of their power. To understand why this happens, we have to look at the anatomy of authority. Most people mistake authority for a title or a position of prominence. They think that if they have the platform, they have the power. But true spiritual authority is not a commodity you own. It is a currency of trust that flows through a conduit. The moment the conduit begins to believe it is the source, the flow is restricted. This brings us to a singular, devastating mistake that has become the standard operating procedure for most modern spiritual movements. It is the subtle, almost invisible shift from pointing to the divine to becoming the destination itself. In the narrative of ancient wisdom, there is a moment where a leader performs a massive act of service that benefits thousands. The natural human response to such a feat is to institutionalize that person. We want to crown the provider. We want to stabilize the miracle by making the miracle worker a king. This is the ultimate trap for any person who carries a genuine gift. The world wants to pay you for your gift by giving you a throne. They want to give you a crown so they can manage the source of their blessing. What makes this so dangerous is that it feels like a promotion. It looks like the ultimate validation of a calling. If the crowds are cheering and the influence is growing, we assume we must be doing something right. But there is a silent law in the realm of the spirit. You cannot be a king in the natural world and a servant of the supernatural simultaneously. You have to choose which kingdom you are going to inhabit. When you accept the crown of human approval, you inadvertently resign from the office of divine representation. This is the one rule that is broken daily in the digital age. We live in a culture designed to harvest attention. Everything about our modern infrastructure tells us that more eyes on us equals more impact. We are told to build a brand, to cultivate a following, and to ensure that our name is synonymous with the work. But the ancient pattern of authority suggests the exact opposite. It suggests that your authority is directly proportional to your invisibility. The more you disappear into the shadow of the truth you represent, the more weight that truth carries. When a leader begins to draw the focus of the people toward their own personality, their own needs, or their own story, they are engaging in a form of spiritual identity theft. They are taking the glory that was meant to act as a signpost and trying to turn it into a residence. This is why so many movements eventually stall. They become personality cults where the original spark of life is replaced by the mechanics of maintenance. The leader is so busy being the king that they no longer have time to be the listener. True authority is found in the ability to walk away from the very thing everyone else is running toward. It is the discipline of refusing to be defined by the expectations of the crowd. If the people want to make you a king because you fed them, you must realize that their hunger is for the bread, not for the truth. If you stay and accept the crown, you become a baker for the rest of your life, bound by the needs of the people rather than the direction of the divine. This first segment of our exploration focuses on the necessity of withdrawal. Before you can lead with power, you must learn to flee from the wrong kind of success. You have to develop an internal alarm system that goes off the moment people start trying to attribute the source of the work to your own hands. If you do not learn to run to the secret place when the crowds are loudest, you will eventually become a prisoner of your own platform. The authority that changes lives is forged in the silence, away from the applause, and it is maintained by a relentless refusal to be anything more than a witness to a power that is not your own. To hold spiritual authority without it shattering your character, there must be a structural death within the individual. Most people pursue the power of a calling while trying to preserve the comforts of their old identity. They want the influence of a sage or a healer, but they also want the validation, the financial security, and the ego boost that comes with being a public figure. This creates a fundamental tension. You cannot carry the weight of the eternal if you are still tethered to the fragile needs of the natural man. This brings us to the concept of the crucified nature. In a world that prizes self-actualization and personal branding, the idea of a voluntary internal execution sounds radical, even offensive. Yet, it is the only safety mechanism for someone handling divine mysteries. The natural man is a vacuum for attention. It thrives on being recognized, being right, and being rewarded. If this part of you remains alive and active, it will inevitably siphon off the glory that belongs to the message. You will find yourself subtly twisting the truth to make it more palatable, more impressive, or more profitable. The hallmark of a crucified nature is a profound indifference to human opinion. This is not the same as being cold or arrogant. Rather, it is the state of being so focused on the source of your authority that the noise of the crowd, whether it is praise or criticism, no longer has the power to move you. When you are dead to yourself, you cannot be insulted, and you cannot be flattered. Both are equally dangerous because they both seek to pull you back into the realm of the natural. Flattery tells you that you are the source of the power. Insult tells you that your value is determined by the people you serve. Both are lies. There are subtle indicators that the old nature is still running the show. One of the most common is the need to defend yourself. When a leader spends significant time and energy managing their reputation or correcting those who misunderstand them, they are demonstrating that their ego is still very much on the throne. True authority does not need a PR department. It is self-validating. If the work is genuine, the results will speak for themselves. If the work is from a divine source, that source is more than capable of defending its own reputation. Another sign of an unrefined nature is the compulsion to compare. We live in an era of metrics. We look at the size of the room, the number of followers, and the reach of the voice. But in the architecture of the spirit, these numbers are often irrelevant. A person with a crucified nature can speak to 10 people with the same intensity and purity as they would to 10,000. They understand that they are not performing for an audience. They are delivering a mandate. The moment you start adjusting your message based on the size of the crowd, you have moved from authority to entertainment. The process of this internal crucifixion is often painful because it involves the stripping away of every earthly prop. It is the dark night where you realize that your talents, your intellect, and your past successes are actually hindrances if you rely on them. You have to reach a point where you can say, with total honesty, that you have nothing to offer except what is given to you in the moment. This total dependency is the birthplace of real power. It is why the most influential figures in history often seemed the most helpless in their own strength. This state of being allows you to handle the applause of the people without it entering your heart. You can receive the gratitude of those who have been helped, but you pass that gratitude upward immediately. You don't store it. You don't let it build up your sense of self-importance. You remain a transparent window through which the light passes. If the window starts thinking it is the sun, it will eventually become clouded by its own pride, and the light will stop reaching the room. The authority we are talking about is not a heavy-handed control over others. It is a weight of presence that comes from someone who has nothing left to lose. When you have already died to your own reputation, your own financial gain, and your own comfort, there is nothing the world can use to manipulate you. You become a truly free agent. This is the authority that demons recognize and the world cannot explain. It starts with a quiet, daily decision to stay on the cross until the old version of you is finally and completely silent. In the pursuit of modern ministry, there is a fine line between being relatable and being common. One of the most subtle ways spiritual authority leaks out of a leader is through the mishandling of personal needs, specifically in the realm of finances. We live in an era that celebrates transparency, often encouraging leaders to bare their souls and share their struggles to appear more human. However, in the architecture of the spirit, there is a profound difference between being human and being governed by the natural realm. When a person who claims to carry a divine mandate stands before a community and highlights their personal lack, a subtle shift occurs in the atmosphere. They are no longer standing in the office of a representative of an infinite provider. They are standing as a solicitor. This is the moment where the glory begins to lift. Why? Because spiritual authority is built on the foundation of a secret life. If your faith does not work in the closet, it has no right to be preached from the rooftop. The loss of respect in the eyes of a congregation is often not an explosion, but a slow erosion. It begins when the people realize that the leader is looking to them as the source of their sustenance, rather than looking to the one they preach about. If you preach that the divine is all-sufficient, but your public discourse is saturated with your own budgetary requirements or personal hardships, you are sending a dual message. You are saying that the truth is powerful, but apparently not powerful enough to take care of the one carrying it. There is a dignity that accompanies true authority, a quiet, high order of living that refuses to stoop to the level of manipulation. This doesn't mean a leader pretends to be a robot or hide the needs of the organization or the building. It is right to share the needs of the work, but it is a spiritual violation to use the platform to solve a personal crisis. The moment you use your spiritual influence to pull on the heartstrings of people for your own pocket, you have moved from a prophet to a profiteer. The secret place is the laboratory where your authority is tested. If you can stay in that room, with the door shut, and present your need to the invisible until the answer manifests in the visible, you have earned the right to speak about faith. You have a solid holy reverence, because you know by experience that you are not supported by the people you lead. You are supported through them, perhaps, but your eyes are fixed elsewhere. This creates a weight to your presence. The people can sense that you don't need them in a way that compromises your message. You are free to tell them the truth, even the hard truth, because your paycheck isn't tied to their approval. Conversely, the leader who begs from the platform becomes a slave to the donors. They begin to subconsciously edit their message to keep the gold flowing. They avoid the sharp edges of the truth because they cannot afford to offend the source of their mortgage. This is how the anointing is sold for a mess of pottage. The authority is traded for security, and the result is a hollowed-out ministry that has the appearance of life, but none of its transformative power. To maintain the bond of peace and the unity of the Spirit, the leader must remain above the natural moving of the world. This is not about being rich or poor, it is about the orientation of the heart. Whether you have much or little, your conversation from the platform should remain centered on the greatness of the one you serve. When you bring your personal lack into the public square, you are dragging the people down into your own anxiety rather than lifting them up into God's sufficiency. The goal is to leave the people richer because you brought them Jesus only. If they leave the meeting thinking about your bills, your car, or your house, you have failed. You have drawn them to your humanity instead of his divinity. True authority is maintained when the leader is so hidden in the provider that the people forget the person and remember only the provision. In the realm of spiritual leadership, there is no phrase more potent and more frequently abused than "the Lord sent me." It is the ultimate conversation stopper, a spiritual trump card designed to bypass human accountability and bypass the natural order of organizational wisdom. Yet, when we dissect the mechanics of true authority, we find that the most powerful individuals are often the most reluctant to claim a direct divine commission for every geographical move they make. This fourth segment explores the danger of self-commissioned activity and the high order of waiting for heaven's true synchronization. Why is the claim of being sent so pervasive? For many, it is a defensive mechanism born out of a deep-seated insecurity. If I can convince you, and more importantly, convince myself that my arrival at your doorstep or my presence on your platform is the result of a direct celestial decree, I am immediately shielded from criticism. If you reject me, you are rejecting the one who sent me. This creates an artificial atmosphere of gravity that the individual hasn't actually earned through character or spiritual labor. The Lord sent me syndrome is often a mask for personal ambition. It is the natural man dressing up his own desires in the robes of a calling. We want to go where the opportunity is greatest, where the platform is largest, or where the financial prospects are most promising. Because we are spiritual people, we cannot admit to these base motivations, so we baptize our ambition in the language of revelation. We mistake our internal excitement for a divine instruction. The transcript we analyzed earlier made a stinging observation. It should never be known that a person called by God caused a distraction, split, or division in a meeting. True authority is a builder, not a wrecker. When a self-sent individual arrives at a location claiming a divine mandate, they often do so with a spirit of entitlement. They expect the red carpet to be rolled out. They expect the existing leadership to step aside for their fresh word. This creates a fundamental breach in the unity of the Spirit. Spiritual authority is not a battering ram, it is a key. If God is truly sending a messenger to a specific body of people, He is more than capable of preparing that body to receive them. The high order of authority dictates that God works on both ends of the wire. If He speaks to the messenger to go, He speaks to the recipient to invite. When a leader shows up unannounced or uninvited, claiming a mandate, they are essentially saying that God is disorganized, that He told the speaker something but forgot to tell the listeners. This lack of synchronization is a hallmark of the called who have not yet been chosen. The called are many. They have the gift, the zeal, and the message. But the chosen are those who have submitted their zeal to the timing of the divine. They have learned the reverence of waiting. They would rather stay in obscurity for 10 years than move one day before the atmospheric doors are opened by the Spirit. When you send yourself, you are forced to sustain yourself. This is where the loss of authority becomes most visible. A self-sent leader must constantly sell their presence. They must manipulate emotions, exaggerate their results, and create a sense of urgency that doesn't exist. They are building a kingdom on the sand of their own charisma. True authority, however, has an earthly quality removed from it. It does not smell of the natural thing moving you. When you are truly sent, there is a rest that accompanies your labor. You don't have to push. You don't have to promote. You don't have to convince people of your importance. There is a spiritual breath in your words that carries its own evidence. As the teaching suggests, your counsel becomes so solid that it cannot be challenged. This solidity doesn't come from the volume of your voice or the height of your claims. It comes from the fact that you are standing on a foundation that you did not lay yourself. There is a profound wisdom in the idea of the second call. The first call is internal. It is the stirring of the heart, the sense of mission, the fire in the bones. But the second call is external. It is the providential opening, the unsolicited invitation, the Macedonian cry from the other side. Walking in high authority means having the discipline to wait for that second call. It means trusting that if the everlasting King wants you in a specific place, He is powerful enough to make a way without you having to kick the door down. This waiting period is where the old nature is further crucified. It is where your pride is stripped away as you watch others, perhaps less gifted than you, being promoted, while you remain in the secret place. But it is in this secret place that the mysteries of the kingdom are unfolded. It is where you learn to reign over the passions of human life, so that when you finally do stand before the people, you are not moved by their applause or their rejection. You are there as a servant of the head, not as a seeker of a throne. The ultimate test of whether someone was sent or went is the fruit. The transcript reminds us that the Lord's anointed shall go forth and bring forth fruit, and their fruit shall remain. Self-commissioned work often produces a flash of heat and light and emotional high, a temporary stir, but it leaves no lasting transformation. It is like a firework, spectacular for a moment, then leaving only smoke and a hollow casing. Fruit that remains is the result of a spiritual being and an activity of holiness. It is the slow, steady growth of a community that is becoming bound together in one spirit. When a truly authorized leader departs, the people are not left dependent on that leader. They are left richer in their own connection to Jesus. They don't say, "What a great man or woman of God." They say, "What a great God." If you find yourself constantly having to assert your authority, you likely don't have much of it. True authority is like gravity. It doesn't need to explain itself to be felt. It is the result of a life that has refused the human desire of the people and opted instead for the spiritual kingdom. It is the choice to be little enough to fill every heart while representing a God who is too big for any church. We have traveled through the architecture of invisible power, the internal execution of the ego, the financial integrity of the secret place, and the discipline of the divine mandate. Now, we arrive at the most critical juncture of the spiritual life, the transition from being merely called to becoming chosen. This final movement is not about a change in status or a higher title. It is about a total yielding of the will that transforms a person from a gifted individual into a consecrated vessel. The statement, "Many are called, but few are chosen," is one of the most misunderstood principles in spiritual growth. Many interpret this as a selective, almost arbitrary decision by the divine to favor a few elites over the masses. However, in the economy of the Spirit, the choosing is often a response to the yielding. The invitation is universal, but the qualification is internal. The called are those who have heard the voice. The chosen are those who have answered with their entire lives, leaving no part of their old nature unsubmitted. To be chosen is to be put under the hand of God. It is a state of being where you are no longer the architect of your own destiny. You have moved past the stage of asking for blessings on your plans and have entered the stage where your only plan is His presence. This requires a level of trust that most people find terrifying. It means standing in the difficult places where two ways meet and having the patience to wait until He says, "This is the way." The transition into the chosen state often happens under what we call the pressure of the presence. There are moments in a person's life, often in a communal setting or a deep time of solitary prayer, where the weight of the divine becomes almost physical. This is not just an emotional high, it is a spiritual confrontation. It is the moment where the everlasting King asks for the keys to the last remaining rooms of your heart. In these moments, there is a moment of pressure that demands a decision. You can either retreat into the safety of your natural talents and human applause, or you can yield and make a dedication to God that you can never take back. This is the altar mentioned in the ancient teachings. It is not a physical piece of furniture. It is the place of sacrifice within the soul where the desire to be made much of is finally laid to rest. When you yield under this pressure, something remarkable happens to your authority. You stop trying to act spiritual and begin to simply be spiritual. Your words take on a spiritual being and an activity of holiness that bypasses the intellectual defenses of those you lead. You are no longer trying to prove anything. You are no longer trying to protect your reputation. You have become a chosen one, and your only concern is the fruit that remains. The transcript hinted at a deeper mystery, the broken alabaster box and the fragrance that fills the whole house. In ancient traditions, the alabaster box represented a person's most precious earthly asset, their security, their beauty, their future. To break it was an act of extravagant waste in the eyes of the world, but it was the only way to release the fragrance. Spiritual authority is that fragrance. It is not the box itself. The box is the personality, the gift, the platform. Many leaders spend their entire lives polishing the box, making it look impressive and valuable. But as long as the box remains sealed, the fragrance is trapped. It is only when the leader allows themselves to be broken by the trials of life and the demands of the Spirit that the true essence of their calling is released. This breaking often looks like failure to the natural eye. It looks like losing a position, being misunderstood, or facing a season of deep limitation. But for the chosen, this breaking is the beginning of their true influence. It is the moment where they stop being fascinating to people and start being transformative. They no longer draw people to their own strength. They draw them to the fragrance of the divine that is now leaking out of their brokenness. The ultimate goal of this yielded authority is the unity of the Spirit in the bond of peace. A leader who is not yielded is a divider. They create factions based on their personality or their specific revelation. But a chosen leader is a unifier. Because they have no kingdom of their own to build, they are free to build the one body. They handle the church with solid holy reverence, recognizing that every member is a part of Christ. They don't see people as audience members or donors. They see them as the temple in the Lord. This perspective changes how they speak and how they lead. They are no longer trying to get the applause of the people by any natural thing. Instead, they are focused on helping the church grow into a perfect unity where everyone has one voice, one desire, and one plan. As we conclude this exploration, we must return to the practical reality of daily life. High spiritual authority is not maintained by a one-time experience at an altar. It is maintained by the daily practice of redirection. Every time you are successful, every time someone praises you, every time you feel the surge of pride that comes from a job well done, you must immediately practice saying, "It was not me, it was the Lord." This must become as natural as breathing. You are training your soul to refuse the earthly quality of human glory. You are keeping your eyes and the eyes of the people fixed on the only one who is too big for any church and little enough to fill every heart. The world is tired of called people who are still full of themselves. It is looking for the chosen ones, those who have been through the fire of the secret place and have come out smelling like the fragrance of the divine. Will you be one of them? Will you allow God to put His hand upon you and lead you through the difficult places? Will you refuse the crown of human kingship so that you can reign in the spiritual kingdom? The altar is ready. The pressure of the presence is here. The choice is yours. In the end, the one rule that most Christians break the rule of drawing people to themselves is solved by a single focus. When Jesus fled the crowds who wanted to make Him king, He wasn't being rude, He was being faithful. He knew that if He became their earthly king, He could never be their eternal Savior. He chose the mountain and the cross over the throne and the palace. Here's our pattern. As you step into the authority intended for you, remember that your greatest power is found in your greatest surrender. Live high in the order and authority of God. Move without a touch or trace of any natural thing. Let your life be a signpost that points so clearly to the divine that people eventually forget the signpost and fall in love with the destination. Go forth as the Lord's anointed. Bring forth fruit that remains. And in every victory, in every miracle, and in every breakthrough, let the world hear the echo of your heart. Jesus only, Jesus only. Glory, glory, amen.